Right. Good morning, everybody, and welcome to Virtual Coffee Morning number 7. I am delighted that this morning we are looking at a really interesting topic. We're going to be talking about social media in the new normal. And to talk about that, we have the absolutely super Joyanne. Joy has been working with me and TechSpark on lots of different things in the last few years and has absolutely schooled me over social media. So she's going to be teaching us lots of interesting things today and giving lots of strong opinions. She's never one to shy away from a strong opinion. So it should be a really good chat. As always, if you have questions for Joyanne or for me, if you want a view from someone that doesn't know what they're talking about, please do ask in the chat on the right hand side, and we'll endeavour to add them in to our conversation, whether it's during as we go or towards the end. So to kick us off, Joy, it would be amazing if you could introduce yourself and give us a bit of a potted history about who you are and what you do.
So, hi everyone. As Ben mentioned, I work with TechSpark and a couple of other companies. I am the founder of The Social Detail, which is an inclusive social media marketing agency. What that essentially means is that we put diversity and inclusivity at the core of all the marketing we do for any brands. We mainly work in the tech and service industry sector, work with various companies like TechSpark, Set Squared, Future Space, and various different tech companies in Bristol. And if you're not in Bristol, those are some well-known companies. Well-known everywhere, not just in Bristol. In terms of me, I kind of became obsessed with social media while working in recruitment and became obsessed with the way that you can connect and reach people on so many levels and in so many sectors. From that's when I started a business, and I was just like, companies aren't utilizing this enough. Like, you can reach anyone and everyone and connect to it, no matter how niche your subject is, someone who's a fanatic in that area.
Absolutely. So let's kick off. And obviously we can't ignore it because it's what we have to talk about all day, every day now. Coronavirus has completely turned the world upside down. Mm-hmm. What impact has it had on social media?
So it's a given that everyone's online now. A lot of social platforms have seen anywhere between 55 to 70% increase. Facebook, which is the owner of most of the platforms, owner of Instagram and WhatsApp, they have seen an increase in their messaging of up to 70%. And something that's been interesting, they have had a lot more signups for Facebook, which was on the decline of other platforms in the past couple of months. So everyone's online, which we all know because we're all at home. The other side of it is people are using the different platforms differently. A lot of it's split between the generations. So a lot of younger people are watching video, consuming video, and getting more involved, where the older generations who may not have been very much on social media are coming on for live streams, kind of like events like this. They're tuning in a lot more.
Cool. So there's a sort of general increase in use and what people are doing. Has there been an increase in different types of engagement and things like that for business users?
So what a lot of businesses are seeing, especially in the B2C market, is that users are engaging with their content and getting a lot more involved in commenting and liking and sharing. What's interesting, though, is that the B2B market is seeing a lot more message to message. So businesses messaging each other. I'm sure everyone's LinkedIn profiles at the moment is blowing up. Whereas in the B2C world is a lot more kind of sharing. So WhatsApp has been the largest growth in communication. So people are taking the B2C content they're seeing, sharing it with their family and friends. So not necessarily going into the DMs of the businesses, but they're always telling everyone about it, which is one of the benefits of social, because it's word of mouth. It's the newest word of mouth.
And are there any platforms where that's not the case? Are there platforms where there's a sort of decline in use as we go into Corona?
Not really. All the platforms are going up. What's kind of declining is businesses' ad spend. So where Facebook made the most of its majority of money from selling ads to businesses, a lot of businesses have just stopped. They've completely put a pause on all their paid media and decided that they're going to super invest in other forms of communicating, which is understandable because no one's really sure how to manage the tone of the messaging they're putting out. You don't want to be selling something inappropriate. I was going to give an example then, but let me not try. But yeah, a lot of businesses have toned down their Facebook, Instagram ad spend, and they're looking more into influencer ads. And in terms of the B2B, LinkedIn was always an expensive platform to advertise on. So it's not surprised that that's gone down and people are reassessing where they're spending their money.
Cool. So that's interesting in terms of if you think about the sort of wider marketing mix coming with GCSE business studies knowledge, sort of marketing as a whole and how that fits into business development. How it feels like, if that's the case, social media has probably changed its relative importance within that mix and how much of time and resource it's absorbing from those teams.
Yeah, it's interesting. A lot of teams are starting to take on social media a lot more seriously. So a lot of more marketing managers are where they would put it off to the intern or put it off to someone to just do it as a side of their job is becoming a full-time role, which was the trend anyway. This has just sped it up a lot more, which is good for people in my sector because we're always pushing social. We're always saying that it's the platform. But because a lot of people are still converting from looking at campaign spends on TV, not necessarily everyone understands the return on investment when spending on social media. So that argument's now out the window because any marketer pushing social media is going to be like, but what if we have another COVID? What are you going to do then? So that's definitely changed.
And I guess thinking about, so marketing has always been a bit of a science as well as an art. Thinking about social, is it more trackable and is it easier to see what the return on investment is than some of the other, publishing, for example, and some of the other spend that you can do as marketing?
Definitely. It's one of those platforms where initially it can seem very vain in terms of gaining followers, gaining likes. But once you set things up like a Facebook tracking pixel, like an Instagram tracking pixel where your ads, you can really retarget the people who are invested in your company and your brand. And that's sometimes what gets missed when people are talking about social media marketing. They're thinking about the fluffier kind of content rather than deep analytics. And the information Facebook has, be it they have a little bit too much sometimes, allows us to really track people. Like if you set up a campaign using the Facebook pixel on your website, you can look at all the people who've come to your website during this COVID era and target them a couple months later and saying, hey, the package we were offering you then, we've now changed it, but because you were interested, we want to give you a discount to sign up. So having that really nitty-gritty analytics, you can't do it TV or billboard.
And not to do you out of any work, but how difficult is it to set up things like a Facebook pixel? Is it the type of thing that anybody with a bit of sort of digital knowledge can do?
Knowledge and patience. Yeah. Knowledge and patience, definitely. So one of the things that people in the marketing world tend to know, Facebook wants everyone to do these things because it means you're going to spend more money. So they make the things searchable and findable, but you just have to know what to look in for. If you search for Facebook Blueprint, that has a course on everything you can do on Facebook. It's what a lot of the marketers and what myself, I learned to keep up to date. Like I said, it is knowledge and patience because at the end of the day, you're dealing with a software and a company that wants you to spend money with them, but they don't want you to make people leave their platform. So they're not going to make it too easy, but it's very doable.
Cool. I say all this as if I do any of it. I just ask you to do it for us. It's good.
We do have a Facebook pixel set up.
Yeah. Great. Well, all of our decisions at TechSpark are entirely data-driven, and I think people would take that for granted. So it feels like with that sort of how social media has changed in importance and where people are using it more, I've certainly noticed that some of the content and content strategy is changing as well. Is that just because you can't make giant big box tele ads from your webcam at home, or are there different things happening?
It's two sides. It's the kind of the leveling field of expectation. A lot of people, the bigger the brand, the higher quality you expect their content to be. But what COVID has done is lower everyone's expectation. They just want original and authentic content. So if that's a grainy video recording from your bathroom and you say that's where you're recording from, people will appreciate it a lot more than some slick, edited, over the top. You can even see a lot of big brands making fun of the fact that they're using stock videos because that's all they have access to. And that's bringing back a more connective community. It's kind of being able to poke fun at your business where you may have been a little bit more serious before. So that change in content, I think, is good. Authenticity online is the number one thing that's winning, especially as Generation Z, the younger generations come up. They expect brands to be authentic about everything.
And that's really interesting, that piece of how you show something that's authentic, because I think although we're all in the same boat, right? We're sort of, some of us are slightly different boats, but everyone is being challenged and every business is being challenged one way or the other. So showing that authenticity is something that I can see is absolutely key. Have you seen some examples of some great stuff out there? What things are there that our audience can look at and hopefully copy?
The good things I see out there is when more B2B businesses are kind of showing the faces behind the company. So there are a couple of companies that are taking part in the challenges that are going around. I think you and I chuckled around the tea bag challenge that was going around. And just the fact that you're starting to see the humans behind who's doing it, especially in tech. A lot of the times, tech companies and software companies present such polished images, and you don't see the person in their sweater spending 10 hours staring at a dark screen, drinking 10 gallons of coffee. That's relatable. So just that more exposure and having those kinds of video content that's authentic and just down to earth is a lot of the good examples I've been seeing.
And does it all have to be relentlessly upbeat? Does it have to be that we're all at home and we're having a brilliant time? Is some of this is a struggle part of that authenticity?
The struggle path is the most relatable. I was listening to, so Social Media Week is happening now in America, which is normally a really big social media conference. And they were just talking about how for some of the Facebook staff, they have to talk to them at 2 a.m. because that's the only time they can get peace from the kids. And just that is the reality of it. The fact that, oh, I can't put my webcam on today because I haven't taken a shower for however many days or whatever it is. It's just a more relatable part of it, and it humanizes the brands that a lot of people seem to miss sometimes.
Yeah. And I think I've seen some really good, authentic stuff in the local community. So Rocket Makers have done lots of great stuff.
Mm-hmm.
Done lots of great stuff. So there has been examples of people doing really interesting things, and the type of work that people like Richard Norton do, even before, with getting lots of traction. If anyone hasn't looked at what Richard Norton does, it's like a selection of slightly insane, using technology and artificial intelligence to develop all sorts of things. So they developed an AI gin recipe last year, but they've done some amazing stuff. And you can see when you speak to Richard and his personality shines through all of the work that they do.
Yep, it does.
He has a very similar personality to his online persona.
You can definitely get a sense of what they're about. And from the minute you see any of their content, it's just like, oh, they're pushing AI to make stuff that we won't necessarily want, but love. I think I tried one of their AI created cupcakes. I was like, I don't know why that would be a thing, but I love it.
Yeah, so it's sort of, it's easy to do in an odd way. You can just be authentic and do stuff.
It's a lot of the ideas that people probably would have said no to before. This is what COVID's given us the experience to play around with things that you would have been like, oh, we're not that type of brand, or it's a bit too, that's not serious enough.
Cool. And I guess on the flip side of that, and I know you have a lot of strong views here, what does bad look like?
Well, so the work I do around inclusive marketing means that I do tend to go off on rants when I see things that aren't very sensitive and very tone deaf. Couple things that I've noticed of late, and Ben has had an earful of this, is
I'm just sympathized.
Is when companies are talking about COVID or putting out any marketing around COVID, that's the only time they seem to use images of East Asian people. And that frustrates me. I'm all here for, especially if you're using stock images, I did a whole campaign about it, using diverse stock images and showing representation in your content. But putting an East Asian person in your imagery, you might as well be putting a stamp on all the crap that Trump says. And the other aspect of it as well is that kind of COVID is affecting different communities differently. And when you're talking about supporting the NHS or supporting communities who are being the superheroes, but all your imagery is of white nurses, white female nurses, when you walk into any hospital in the UK and you know that's not the majority of staff. That's the other side. I'm just like, okay, let's have some realistic things. If you're going to look at the numbers of the people working in there and represent that. So those are my two things that bug me a lot. And I send Ben a link every time with a rant, like, why are they doing this? Who's in charge? Who can I have a go at? The other things that's a little bit more relatable to smaller brands is sometimes the tone of the content isn't always aware of the situation we're in. So kind of going back to your point, Ben, about you can't be too cherry. You can celebrate things, but we're not going to go over the board and be like, oh, let's go out and have a beer together because we can all do that. And just looking at the content again and being like, if I was to consume that, would I want to hear it? Would that be something I would want to put out online? And a quick tip for that as well. Twitter is a great place to kind of test how people are talking about different topics. So what you can do in Twitter and Facebook, any phrase, it doesn't need to be a hashtag, you can search it and see other people who have mentioned that phrase and how they're talking about it. So that will give you a sense of, okay, are people talking about this in a bad way or a good way? Do I want my brand to be affiliated with that conversation?
And I think there's certainly something that our editor at TechSpark picks up on a lot, which I guess is more PR than social media, is there's a lot of businesses that have pivoted their content and their activity to be around Corona. And it feels a bit like some of that content is literally just sort of shoehorning Corona in somewhere.
Yeah.
If you are one of those businesses, are there ways to do that effectively, or is it just don't try because it's going to backfire?
It is going to start backfiring. Corona as a search word is starting to decline. It's hit its peak. People are starting to get fatigue. People are more looking at the whole, what can we do after? With the whole pivoting and supporting, the thing that brands need to be aware of is that it's going to have a situation that if you put out that you're going to do something like make masks, or you're going to do something like make hand sanitizer, you're setting a standard of your company's values and that you're giving back at a very high level, and people are going to hold you to that standard forever out. So don't just switch to support COVID or Corona victims and then not continue supporting other things when this is all over, because now that's the expectation of you. So it's a decision that I think people should not take lightly.
Yeah. So I only have a couple more questions for you. So if people do want to put questions in, make sure to add them in the chat, and I will pick Joy's brain on them. Something where I think we probably are going to get some questions, so I'll ask you now. Do you have any tips for small businesses and founders on how they can get the most out of social media?
So first tip would be to set up your analytics, even if you have 0 to no audience, just so that makes it easier for you to go back and test content. A top tip now, if you're in an industry that's not drastically affected by COVID and it's still appropriate, is to A/B test ads on Facebook, as the cost of ads is lower than it's ever been. It's like 0.01 pence per click now, which is ridiculous, especially from some industries like the B2C market. I would also look at using your employees and your team, or even yourself, and looking at using yourselves as influencers. So this is a time to share your processes and how you develop what you do. It's a time to kind of tell your founder story and how you got started in a business. A time to do things with the team, if it's even sharing with people that you had a game night as a team and all the questions were around quantum physics or whatever industry you're in. I always pick quantum physics because it seems hard. But whatever industry you're in, these are the times to share a light on it and definitely let people see behind the curtain. Another thing that small businesses can do is have a look at your process and systems in place to have consistent content. With social media, before COVID and after, it's going to be about consistency. It's going to be about being present and being around in conversation. And a lot of people don't take it seriously when their social media managers are talking about the time it takes to do these things. So now that things are slowing down in terms of content production, start looking at what process you can put in place to up your customer service on platforms, to look at how you can create content with the whole team or get subtitles added to any of your video content, and look at softwares and tools. There's Canva, Clipchamp, Rev.com, Headliner, Loom. Those are all video softwares that you can test out for 30 days, some are even free, to see what you can implement. So when you start ramping things back up, if it's slowed down for you, it can help. If you are busier now because you're more in the B2C market, those things could help cut time and save you on efficiency.
And in terms of some of those tools, how important is things like scheduling tools? Are they saving a lot of time for people? Are they something that is important that people use? I know you use scheduling for us, but we have many social media.
Many platforms. So scheduling tools are good, but they're not the be all and end all. I would say the best thing to do with scheduling tools is look at your evergreen content. So content that is not going to expire, which is what TechSpark has a lot. There's a lot of valuable information that could be relevant now or in the future. So scheduling tools like Buffer, Hootsuite, Content Cal. We use HubSpot internally, but it can be quite pricey. Even Meet Edgar are all good tools, but they're looking at the secondary time. So if you have a content schedule that you're going to put out a blog and this blog's going to be relevant in a couple months' time, you can schedule it in again. So that's where the content and scheduling tools is more so, what can I publish in a month's time that will be relevant?
And how should people think about different channels and platforms and how they prioritize? Because I know we've talked a lot before about different social media channels have different audiences, and and you know, what I might be interested in on Instagram is not what I'm interested in on LinkedIn, and vice versa.
Yeah, that's very much split into B2C or B2B. So I'll start with the B2B market. In terms of B2B, especially in tech, you're looking at LinkedIn, Twitter, and possibly Facebook, with Instagram being a same level with Facebook there. Sorry, my mic just fell over. So LinkedIn for the B2B market utilizing the profile of the founder and the kind of lead salesperson in your company is the most useful part of it. And it's definitely a platform where connections and networking is amazing. One of the biggest things on LinkedIn is that everyone you connect with wants to help in some way. So I always say to founders and entrepreneurs, the questions that you're contemplating or having difficulties with yourself, post them on LinkedIn, get other people's opinion and engage with those people. Then Twitter would be kind of outreaching to the audience and sharing your knowledge. So tech Twitter is huge. There's constant conversations about how tech can save everything, fill in said blank. And being on that platform and being present, taking part in the conversations is really key in the B2B market, because once you're seen to be communicating with leaders of influence, then your social currency goes up. So that's any kind of interactions you have is what I consider social currency. And then LinkedIn and Facebook, that goes a little bit more detailed in the sense of for the B2B market, not LinkedIn, Instagram is more kind of highlighting what's it like to work in your company. What can you show about how your company's values and ethics are? A good B2B Instagram account is Buffer, which is a scheduling tool. Their whole team is remote and they solely use their Instagram account to highlight what it's like to work in a remote company. On the B2C side, you're looking more so Instagram, Facebook, and then Twitter last, with LinkedIn more for sales aspects. Facebook being first because you can really target people. Facebook ads for the B2C market is the most useful thing you can have because you can target people and put them into a sales funnel based on what pages on your website they clicked. So I saw there was a quick question about the Facebook pixel. That's where you'd use the Facebook pixel to track people on what actions they take and then retarget them again.
Cool. So I'm going to go slightly off script now, Joy. So can you give me a response in one sentence to a couple of these things with limited swear words because it's not yet noon? So should businesses be using TikTok?
You know my answer to this. No. Yes and no. Okay. If you are boho, I'm trying not to swear. If you're boho or if you're Next or B2C, really trendy, you work with influencers all the time, cool. But please do not jump on TikTok with restrictions around the content you can create and think people are going to find it interesting. TikTok's all about personality. And sometimes some companies aren't that generally interesting to the wider public.
So as a millennial, do you think every one of us and every business should have a podcast?
Podcasts are growing. I think every business who's going to be a thought leader in their field should have a podcast, because that's how you kind of show. It's the sense of, if you look at a brand like Social Chain, they are, in marketing terms, one of the thought leaders around social media marketing. And they're like, if you are an influencer with 1 million followers, Social Chain is in your DMs faster than anyone else. So the podcast aligns with that. They're keeping people up to date. But if you're just going to talk, actually, there's a need for techie podcasts as well. I was like, if you're going to talk code and Python and different GitHub repos, there's a market for it. But your podcast, it depends on what your goal is. It shouldn't always be sales. Sometimes it's just showing your knowledge.
And going back to the olden days, how valuable are newsletters?
Oh, newsletters, those guys. So the professional answer is newsletters are valuable because you are claiming people's details outside the social platform. Facebook could go down tomorrow, Instagram could go down, LinkedIn could revoke everyone's access. So that is you should have a newsletter. If people actually read your newsletter is a whole other side. So I kind of base it on Are you compliant with GDPR? What is your open rate? How often are you sending it? And play around with it. Personally, I read about one newsletter a month, if that.
Which is odd because TechSpark sends you a weekly newsletter. I read. What is so I know depending on the industry it does differ, but what sort of roughly an industry average for an open rate around newsletters?
I think anything above about 5% is really, really good. So yeah, TechSpark's newsletter does well.
I looked at our partner newsletter this morning. 43% have opened it so far. Yeah. Cool. So that was slightly off piste for you because you didn't know I was going to ask those things, but it's useful to get some views from you. Going back to what we talked about before, do you think all these changes are going to be permanent?
I think it's going to be an attempt. There's a lot of people who've picked up things during COVID that are saying, oh, they're really enjoying it. That's a general trend. Oh, I read 5 books this week. I want to continue that. But as we go back out to meet the real world and engage, my personal opinion is that there'll be a sharp drop, and then there'll be the nostalgia of the times when we had time to talk to everyone. So we should level out at some point, I think about 2 to 3 months after, when people go back to balancing real world expectations, being outside, and still wanting to crave that communication with their family and friends from a distance. The other things that I believe would spike is Facebook ad spend. As soon as everyone is back on spending, the cost of Facebook ads is going to go right back up.
Cool. So some questions from our audience, and I guess related to what you've just been talking about. Ashley has asked, do you think there's going to be a shift to any single platform post-corona? Or I suppose during corona and then after corona?
So the shift already occurred with the spike of TikTok. And that's TikTok's kind of enabled people to see themselves as influencers, as content creators, and just play, which is something that we don't really get to do on the internet outside of being in the gaming industry. That spike, I think, is going to drop because a lot of millennials like me who have a lot of time now are joining TikTok. We're going to go back to not having time. I don't think one platform is ever going to have monopoly based on people's different tech levels. So TikTok takes understanding video, understanding music, understanding lip syncing, whereas Facebook, you sign up, you send a message. So there's always going to be a separation based on the generational techiness of people. Another one that spiked that I think might continue was WhatsApp. And if Facebook starts pushing WhatsApp for business a lot more, which is quite large in India, it might have a spike in the UK. So that'll be interesting to see what happens with that.
Yeah, well, Facebook have invested $6 billion into Geo in the last week, so they clearly think there's something valuable there. And that's their e-commerce play for India. And it's just occurred to me that we've not mentioned it at all, and I've not even mentioned it, I think, in the last 12 months. Does Snapchat still exist?
Not for the reasons you want to know. Snapchat is like the Tinder of social media. Tinder is the social platform, but yeah.
Cool.
It's not now.
So Bryony's asked, what metrics should we be using to inform our actions at the moment as a small tech company?
There should be a...
Is it reach? Is it engagement? What's the metric?
I think right now impressions is your best metric based on the fact that more people are online. If you can continue to increase the impressions, your other aspects should go. So once you get your impressions up, which are the number of times your content is seen, then you can start looking at engagement, because engagement can be hard to get, but it's something you can test. So if you consistently have impressions of 1,000 or more on a post, then you can start playing around with call to actions like click here, or do you want to see a video, come here kind of thing. And then that would help you realize what content is valuable. Cool.
So Johnny is interested in Facebook Pixel. He is predominantly doing things on LinkedIn though. Is there an equivalent on LinkedIn? How do you use LinkedIn Analytics?
So there is an equivalent on LinkedIn, but that's solely for LinkedIn ads. And they want you to spend. LinkedIn ads tend to be a lot more expensive, around £2 to £3 per click, when we compare that to the less than a penny click for Facebook. So if you go into LinkedIn Ads Manager, you'll be able to access their pixel and put it on your website. In terms of a personal profile on LinkedIn, there isn't much direct off-platform tracking you can do. But for all your posts, once you put them out, I would say after 2 or 3 days, go back and have a look at the metrics, which they show you at the bottom of any post you put out on your page and your personal.
And then on LinkedIn, what is the difference between whether you should be posting as a company or as a person? Because lots of our businesses have founders who are quite prominent in their own right, I guess.
Mm-hmm. So a nice trick is on your company page, you want to post celebrations, things you've achieved as a company, and get everyone in the team to then share it to their profiles. Because company pages only really work once you build a following, but to build the following, you have to use the social capital of all the people in your team and in your company. The other aspect is focusing on building the profiles of the individuals in your team. So anytime you have a big project happening or a huge case study, I would share it from the individual profiles first and start conversations around it, and then have the company page reshare that. So at LinkedIn, there's a lot of company page profile cross lap over, because company pages, unless you're a huge multimedia brand or tech spark, a lot of people don't follow company pages.
Yeah, and I guess we're publishing news about other people, so we're not someone to emulate, I guess, in terms of our company page. So Zara is interested in what's a good frequency for social media messaging? How many times a day, an hour, a minute?
My answer for this is always it should be based on your own analytics, which Facebook and Instagram provide. If you go into the analytics, you can see when your audience that follows you are awake. And if you post half an hour before the peaks. In terms of Twitter and LinkedIn, it's all about experimentation. Starting out, I say Twitter 2 or 3 times a day with something interesting, vet your content. And LinkedIn starting out 3 times a week. And once you start seeing traction on certain posts, you either up it or increase it. For some people, they can post once a week and have 50 to 80 comments under that. I will always prioritize responding to comments and messages than posting continuous content. So if you're going to have 50 responses to one post a week, spend the rest of that week responding to everyone and building relationships rather than trying to pump out another article or another piece or another think piece. But frequencies is a personal experiment, as always. Some people could post once a week or once a month and get away with it. Some people need to post multiple times a day.
So I guess, Georgina's asking a follow-up question around that, particularly around whether at the moment you think people should be posting less. I know, so Georgina works in the cybersecurity sector. So are there differences in different industries where some people should be posting more and some people should be doing less?
Yeah. So it depends on how you can put across your messaging. In terms of cybersecurity, this is like a really good time for anyone in cyber, because a lot of people coming online are not aware. And if you can get someone up to date on a simple way to protect themselves, they'll take it a lot more serious now than they ever would have before. Because before it was like, oh, I'm only online every now and again. Oh, my Mac will protect me. Even myself, I was like, oh, my Mac doesn't get a virus. And then I was like, oh, okay, everyone's on the internet, every hacker's around. And I started seeing a lot more cyber content. So during COVID, if your content can help and can change the way people are doing things or better their lives, you can post more. It's not going to be seen as insensitive. If it's more, your posts are more sales focused or more dry, for lack of a better phrase, then that's when you're looking at cutting down the frequency of that. But it all depends on the tone and messaging.
Cool. And I guess related to that, David had a question, which was, how do you balance new and original content versus reusing content?
So new content, you want to make it as current with the times as possible. So things that are happening in the company, things that are happening with you. If you're on Instagram and soon to be Twitter, you can post stories. And that's probably how you can put out a lot more new content, but not have to worry about it expiring or not being relevant for the time. In terms of reusing content, you need to look at how can you pivot that content. If you originally created the content to be evergreen, so for example, an accountancy firm, they can have something about how to set up a cash flow template. That is something that is going to be continuously an evergreen, but the way they talk about it might change. So they may post about it now saying, okay, you've been furloughed. Now you need to consider how you're planning your time and how you're planning your spend. Here's a cash flow to help you do that. So it's the way you speak about the same article is how you can change the messaging, but the content on the page of your website can be the same.
Cool. So a final question from me then, which we ask everyone. What do you think is the best thing about the Bristol and Bath tech community?
No, the best thing I think about it is the connectivity of the network. As you know, Ben, I'm diving deeper and deeper into data and exploring that, and just being able to have conversations with so many experts in a close-knit network. When before COVID, when we used to be in Engine Shed, you can be there for an hour and literally meet leaders and meet people who are not only there to talk with you, but sincerely show interest and just friendliness. So I think that's one of the best bits.
Amazing. Well, thank you so much for this morning. It's been really insightful and I think really useful to lots of people in the audience. So I'm really grateful that you've taken the time to do that. We will be finishing up now, but I have a series of announcements to give you all. So as you know, hopefully these coffee mornings happen every week. We will be having another coffee morning next week where we'll be having a mashup with some people from the property industry. So we're going to be looking at how property and construction is going to be impacted in the future. So that should be really interesting. We'll post the link in chat shortly. Please do register for that. We also have a series of events that are going on around investment and pitching. One particularly called Pitch Me, where people can come and they can try out pitching of what their company is and get some advice from business leaders and investors. So we'll put that link in as well. And please do come along to that. If you want to try out your pitch as a founder or an entrepreneur, I think we possibly have a single slots left. So that's in a couple of weeks. So please do come to that. And the final thing is on the left of your screen. I had to work that out then. If you are on desktop, in a moment, we will be moving across to the networking area for the next hour and 2 minutes before everybody gets kicked out. Please, if you haven't tried it before, do go across to networking. It's really cool. It sets you up on a 4-minute video conversation and moves you along. So it's a great way to have brief chats with people about who you are and what you're doing. You don't have to do it for the entire hour. You can just go and try a quick 4 minutes. Joy and I will be over there. So you might, if you're very lucky, get to chat to us again. That's it from me. But thank you again to Joy and, of course, to all of our partners that enable all this to happening. And I'll see you all again next week. Thanks.
Bye.